Welcome back to the British Eurofighter Typhoon. It is 14.0 because the battle rating just increased by 0.3. Still not enough, but it's good to see that they're at least trying a little bit. And it's behind the Gripen, all the way on the left on the British tech tree. Now, the release here is a little bit buggy. A lot of invisible missiles. My TWS doesn't particularly work on this plane. But overall, this plane is an absolute menace. It is disgusting, and at high altitude, this thing really reigns supreme. It's extremely fast, good acceleration, and it just doesn't lock up whatsoever. At 1.5 Mach, it's very easy to just kind of start pulling, and you don't really notice that you're going that fast because the plane just responds to your inputs like you'd be going 800 kilometers an hour. It feels extremely weird, and very often I'm not even sure how fast or how slow that I'm flying, because the plane just feels the same no matter what speed you're at. So it's very easy to just completely tear your wings off, because you will be pulling 21 Gs at higher speeds if you try to roll and correct with the rudder. It feels extremely responsive to an arcade level degree. So I'm not entirely sure if this is final, because the patch is of course a little bit rushed, and with a little bit I mean as severe as that F-15. But of course the maneuverability, while very nice, which might help you out in the occasional game, it's not the most important factor. It's all about the BVR as well as the early game potential. And overall, this thing has it all, except for the radar. The TWS right now is extremely finicky, and if you don't go onto the narrow band, it is almost impossible to maintain lock. Now, I'm not sure if this is bugged either, or if this is supposed to be like that, but it's extremely annoying right now to get TWS with multiple people. Now, if you lock onto one, I recommend just kind of keeping your lock on them. If this gets fixed, this should be completely okay, and you can start flying this a little bit like you would with the F-15E. And because you are actually maneuverable at high speed, it's extremely easy to just notch missiles at medium altitude despite going so fast. So it's a lot less risky. You can just go cold, you can outrun most of the missiles, and overall this plane is virtually untouchable up there. Now the F-15Es are basically the only competition that you are going to find at high altitude, but the thing is that they are gonna have to defeat your missiles by turning, whereas you can actually try to close the gap and notch the missile. You are able to turn out, notch it without any issues at like Mach 1.4, which what makes this thing so strong. It's not as stupendous as something like with a Mirage, where you can off-ball with the Mikas at point blank. You do need to have a little bit of separation, but you know, the flight model makes up for it tenfold. The only real issue right now is going to be the TWS. Mirage comes in, we shot the missile at the wrong guy, that's why I shot it at someone else and not the Mirage. I tried to delock, but I pressed fire instead. So now I'm not really able to do anything. So instead I'm going to maintain the notch here. We're going to slow down a little bit in a second, but you can tell that I'm pulling so hard for this kind of altitude with this kind of speed, where I don't really need to worry about air braking or dumping speed, because I'm actually turning fast enough to shed it anyway. I get a load of position early on, and I basically end up two-turning the Mirage here. We get the first shot, but we miss it, and then we line up for the second shot, prep the missile, and all we need to do now is make... And of course, the German one has to get the better variant, and I'm going to show you this with a very easy showcase. The Eurofighter Typhoon is also the fastest submarine known to man. Now you can fly through terrain with it. I wouldn't really recommend doing it in air albedo, because you kind of just get stuck under the terrain. As you can see here, when you go into the cockpit view, you can see the trees flying overhead. You're kind of skimming along the water. Make sure that you don't go too much into the water, because you will drown your plane. And sometimes when you come out, you need to be looking for trees, basically, trees in houses, because even though you might be able to fly through 20 kilometers of mud, rocks, sand and terrain, the second you hit the immovable object called the tree, you're going to just explode. Same thing with the houses. So you can go under the map like this, and you're basically impossible to touch, but keep in mind, it counts you as being under the ground, which means that you also can't fire out of it. So it's kind of useless, but it's pretty funny. So I expect this to be fixed relatively early on, but I want to just have a little bit of attention on it, so that Gaijin might actually be aware of it. And it doesn't matter how hard you slam it in, it will just go in, and you will start skimming across it. Now if you go too steep, you will of course go into the water, which means that your plane will drown again. Now we are skimming here, we're kind of just stuck on the upper edge, and then the second we get out here in a second, there's trees, and you actually end up exploding. And there you have it. The first time we actually died is because of a tree. So, how do we fly this thing? Well, it's pretty straightforward, really. It's the same thing every time you play top tier. You just kind of want to position yourself. You want to have some altitude. But with this thing, it's very important to be aware of your surroundings. But what about the maneuverability? Let's actually put a little bit of emphasis on it at higher altitudes. It's not about dogfighting. It's about getting your nose around and actually defending against missiles. You are very responsive, and having this amount of energy and still being able to just kind of whip your nose around and missile people out of the air is extremely powerful. Because right here we shoot a missile at the F-15 and we have already notched and turned out before he even launches his missile. He dies and we basically get the freest kill imaginable just because we are able to go cold before he even gets his nose on. It's kind of hard to showcase this properly right now because the TWS doesn't really work, so the early game potential, while absolutely massive, with how the radar is currently, you're not going to really get anything done. And there you have it. That's the first rip of today's video. You kind of just blow your wing off. It's perfectly flyable with one wing, even when you lose both of them. You can just go back to base, land and rearm as long as there's no one on your 6. This should really not be an issue. We do the same thing here. We try to get a little bit closer because the TWS isn't working, and I'm still trying to showcase the early game potential whenever possible. And I'm kind of flying parallel with this other Eurofighter 2000 right here. So we just kind of turn in. He's not really paying attention to us. That first missile is going to miss. And we prep the AIM-9M and just kind of dive on top of him. He's multi-padding, no real reason to start shooting MRAMs at him there. So we switch on over, we keep going straight, and we lock onto the two Eurofighters in front of us. We turn out, we go for the notch, and again, we blow both of our wings off. Now, we're gonna notch that missile successfully, and you can tell that this is perfectly flyable. I'm picking up speed. I managed to dodge that first missile, and I totally don't get run down and have 6 more of them shot my way. But if you do rip your wings off and you do it in a position where you're not instantly going to get jumped by 6 people with a chair, you should be completely okay, as the plane is still pretty responsive. It has enough lift to just kind of belly land it at like 400 to 500 kilometers an hour, and you really shouldn't worry too much. Now, don't go too slow, because when you start going into like 300 kilometers an hour without any wings, you of course will just fall out of the air and faceplant right into the ground. Now here we're going Mach 1.6. I want you to take a look at the Mach number here, and we dodge that like we're going like 900 kilometers an hour. That is the absolute strength of this plane. At high altitude, this thing is virtually uncontested just by the amount of options that you have. Now we kind of go cold here. There's a lot of people at altitude, and I'm not really feeling the BVR contest right now. I was going cold. I had to notch that missile because I saw it way too late. I responded way too late. And now I'm kind of out of position. So what do? We just kind of gain separation. And this plane is fast enough to do this all day long. The acceleration is, of course, absolutely obscene. It doesn't have 1.83 thrust to weight like some people are suggesting. But trust me, it is more than sufficient, even without that obscene number. We turn back in and we see 2 guys relatively low to the ground. They are bombing, and I'm just gonna shoot 2 of my MRAMs off. And I'm already like prematurely going out a little bit. And look at this turn. I'm going 1.4 Mach, and I turn out like I'm going 700. Now I know it's the Eurofighter and it's kind of designed to do this, but it's just absolutely wild to see this in the game to this degree. We start turning out again, we kind of go cold, we're just maintaining our distance here, and I'm just trying to see if I can engage anyone so that it opens up the game. Right now I'm looking for some guys that are either at altitude or out of position, or people that are kind of trying to run me down. I know that when I get spotted early on, and I don't mean with my name tag, I got shot at early on, there is a chance that someone has been tracking me through TWS for the rest of this match. So I do want to be kind of careful. I'm just kind of waiting for them to come to me, because I don't want to go into a dogfight whenever I'm in a 2 or a 3v1. Now this plane is very capable of winning such a thing, if the enemy messes up, of course, but it's not a situation I will put myself in willingly this early on in the game. Now the F-15 that was running us down, or that was locking us, is actually bombing and flying straight over there, so I'm going to ignore him for now, and we are going to start going for the guy at orbit here. Now we have the track IR here, we have the RST on, just so that I can lock him up without giving away my position, because I know that the TWS is absolutely whack. So instead, I'm just going to get a little bit closer, just to make sure that the lock is going to be solid. And you can tell here, I'm trying to fire a missile with the IR mode. It doesn't work, for the people that are wondering. And I mean, because of his position, I'm able to just kind of close the gap and shoot the missile at such a range where he is never going to be defeating it. Kind of just snuck up on him, he goes down, and then we start going to look for the F-15 again that was flying towards the other side of the map. He's kind of alone right there, and I do want to dogfight him. We have an F-16 on our RWR behind us, but our entire team is on that side of the map, so I am not exactly too scared of him. FRF ice pops up. Now we turn off the radar. I'm not going to shoot the missile in this kind of aspect because it's going to be notched even if he doesn't try. So we kind of just loop on over. We get on the 6. I'm not entirely sure if he sees us, if he's trying to run away, or if he's just... It's an FRF ice, so it doesn't really matter what he does. He does see me because he starts turning, he flares, but the AIM-9M has found his victim and he goes right back to the hangar. That's going to be kill number 4, and now we start looking for the F-15 again. Now I'm not entirely sure where he is, so I go onto the slightly wider band TWS to look for him, and we pick him up. He's 29 kilometers away. He's kind of low to the deck, so I'm expecting him to multipad the missile if we do shoot one at him, so I'm not going to fire it at this range regardless. I'm going to see if he goes up a little bit, if he gets a little bit of separation between him and the ground, meaning that I can actually MRAM him in the head-on. But I do want to use the terrain myself because I don't really feel like multipadding right now, because, well, sometimes the missile just hits the ground and splashes you out of the air, so you don't want that to happen. Now he has a sizable altitude separation here between him and the ground, so I just decide to shoot the missile off. We dip into the terrain. He multipads the missile, so nothing really comes from it. And we start just skimming along the terrain here. I don't really have to worry about the head-on. I don't have to worry about the merge. I'm in the Eurofighter Typhoon. I can do whatever the hell I want. Top Gun Maverick out here shoots the missile of the Mirage out of the air with an AIM-9M. And then he turns in front of us. And I'm going for him. And I'm going way too fast. This guy's going a lot slower than I thought he was. So I basically just instantly overshoot. But we are going to cut throttle for a second, just to make sure that we get the position. I don't want to end up in front of him and play energy. I just want to outturn him, and we do that in basically 2 turns. Just look how quickly we managed to line it up here. We just underlead to 27, and here you have it, some of the best damage you will ever see, because the 27mm is still obscenely dogshit. Thank you all for watching, and you'll see me in the next one.